Hello and welcome to Faith Matters. This is the show where we look at current affairs through the prism of faith and belief. My guests this week are Mark Latham and Hilary Morgan from Street Pastors. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, Mark. You're a local business person over on the Wirral, on the dark side, and you're also the coordinator for Street Pastors on the Wirral. Just tell us a bit about your role.
Well, I'm a businessman. In terms of the coordinator, I obviously look after the teams that go out on a Friday night in Birkenhead, making sure that people who are vulnerable get home safely in the same state generally as they came out in. Give or take a few more drinks inside them.
Right, okay, I was going to say.
When I say the same state, as in, they're not beaten up or, covered in sick, which tends to be the case. But generally, we operate around the city centre, walking around patrolling between 11:15 and 4 a.m. And that's contextual. That's just obviously to make sure everybody gets home safe. We give out the flip-flops and pick up broken glass and pick up bottles and cans that might be used as weapons. We've been involved in sort of separating the odd fight or two that tends to take place in that area.
So you're talking Birkenhead and also Liverpool city centre?
Well, Birkenhead seems to be more cases of violence occurrences. Okay. Having been involved in Liverpool for nearly 2 years, I would say that I haven't seen that happen so much. Each area is different, you see, and that's the wonderful thing about street pastors is contextually the need of a street pastor varies depending on which area you're in, and the nighttime economy shifts and changes depending on the nighttime economy. So Liverpool's more transient. They have a student population. They've got tourists that are always in the city centre. There's more of them. There's over 100,000 people out on a Saturday night. Birkenhead's more insular. It tends to be the same people that we see that we've noticed over the past 3 years of patrolling. There's more of a regular group of people.
So tell us a bit about the history of Street Pastors, how it started, just briefly.
Yeah, I mean, without going into too much details, it was identified in 2003 that by Reverend Les Isaac that there was a need, following a visit abroad, that there was a need within the UK for people.
And this
the
was
church.
In London?
It was in London. It started off in Brixton in 2003. That's where it was launched, in Brixton. It just came out of the fact that it was identified that there was not much happening during the nighttime economy for people, and a lot of people, wanted to get the church involved, and so Les Isaac set it up to provide a church response really to urban issues.
And it's spread throughout the country, and I'm right in saying this is the biggest Christian or church-based charity in the UK. Is that correct?
Yeah.
10,000.
It is. Well, there's over 12,000 street pastors now.
Over 12,000 now. Street pastors.
And that doesn't include prayer pastors, and it's not only in the UK.
So they're kind of supporting.
Prayer pastors support it, and I would include them in that because they are a value asset to it all. But in terms of actual volunteers on the streets, there's over 12,000, and that number grows weekly. But also the number in terms of places we're in is global now. We're over 60 countries. Okay,
Hilary, Liverpool City Centre, you're part of the team there. As I know Mark also helps out there as well. Tell us about that project. How long have you been running? How did it start?
Liverpool actually with the first pastors were commissioned the 1st of October 2011. I came on board January 2012, I think it was. But it was the police who actually asked for street pastors.
Why was that?
Because they saw the need, they'd seen the success in other cities and saw the need that it would be good to have in Liverpool. As Mark said, with all the people who come to Liverpool who don't know their way around, it's good to have that presence on the streets of people who are going to care and look after people without it actually impinging on the economy, because we're all volunteers. So, of course.
So this is a partnership between the police.
The city council, I believe, were involved to start with. As I say, I wasn't in the first wave, as it were. So what I know is what I've learned from the street pastors that I trained with. There's the street pastors in West Derby in Liverpool. There's Ormskirk, there's Southport, Liverpool City Centre.
So it's spreading throughout the Merseyside region.
We're actually the newest, I think. I think Southport, Ormskirk and West Derby were already going when Liverpool city centre
So
was
you
formed.
go out on a Saturday night between what hours?
We meet at the Anglican Cathedral about 10:30. We stock the car up, we pray before we leave the cathedral for whatever we're going to face that night, and that our footsteps are where we're meant to be. But then we go down, we actually have, very lucky, we have a vehicle that was provided by the police in Liverpool.
Oh, really? That's
that
great.
has city centre street pastors on it, has our phone number. So if somebody sees the van, sees the phone number and needs us, they can ring us.
And so you're basically pastoring, which is a word which refers to shepherding, really.
Yes.
Looking after.
Yeah, caring.
You're caring for people on the street that
Yeah.
are out on the street,
Yeah.
Enjoying themselves,
Yeah.
out on the tiles.
Yeah, the idea is that they keep enjoying themselves.
Yeah,
and
they don't
stay
get into
safe.
trouble.
Yeah, and we do that, as I say, we leave the cathedral probably about 22:11. We're down on Church Street where we're allowed to park the vehicle, which we have stocked with water, flip-flops, space blankets, wet wipes, surgical gloves, because if we need to help somebody clean up, we've got to keep ourselves safe as well.
Yeah.
But we park there and we patrol the whole of the town centre as much as we can with however many people are out. Ideally, we would have 2 teams of 4, so that one team's up Matthew Street, up around the Gay Quarter or around there, and then the other team can be up in Concert Square, and you can just sort of cross over as the night goes on.
And you're kind of well received by everybody?
Very. I think at first there was a lot of suspicion that we were going to be a pile of Christian do-gooders who were going to be Bible bashing. Now that they know that the people who are out are there to help, to get involved, it's a non-judgmental presence.
Because you're not allowed, are you, according to the rules of street
We're
pastors,
not
to
there
Bible
to
bash?
preach.
You know.
We're not there to preach. If somebody speaks to you about your faith, you can share with them because they've instigated a conversation. But the whole idea is that we're doing what Jesus would have done. We're on the streets, we're helping, we're a presence, we're showing through what we're doing what we believe, and that is the biggest thing you can do.
Faith in action.
It is very
bit
much
like the food
faith in
banks that we had
action.
on last week. It's the same kind of thing.
It's to be out there and help people.
Okay, Mark, you'll come back to you, Hilary. But Mark, you're a business person. What makes you, surely you're just interested in making money, aren't you? I mean, what makes you want to go out and do this? Give your time away like this?
It's an interesting question, but I would add the fact that I'm a Christian businessman, and so that's the priority for me in terms of I've been in the area that I operate in as a coordinator for street with the street pastor hat on. I've been in business be 21 years in April, and I've been on the Wirral in Birkenhead operating a business for that period of time, and so the area that I'm familiar with, is basically the area we patrol. We patrol the streets of Birkenhead, and we call ourselves Wirral because we were hoping to expand across Wirral because there's a need. New Brighton is an emerging nighttime economy, and there's other areas that we'd love to be in. But in terms of the comment of making money, I feel as a Christian businessman, I've been placed in Birkenhead. I've been guided there. That's where I'm meant to be as such, and I operate and do a lot of work for a lot of churches and different Christian parachurch-based organisations. And for me, that just gives me the opportunity to, instead of just kind of seeing the problems that happen within the area, is actually doing something about it and being out on the streets.
Great. And Hilary, I've described you as a kind of ordinary Scouse Liverpool housewife. Is that, I hope that doesn't sound patronising.
No, that's exactly what I am.
And you live in the south of the city.
Yeah, I'm married. I've got 3 kids.
So what possesses you to go out on the street between,
precisely that,
until 4 o'clock in the morning?
Because the kids who are out on the streets are the same as my kids, and the thought that somebody's out there looking after them, why shouldn't it be me? It's a great thing to know that there are people out there looking after the kids. Some nights you see people who make themselves so vulnerable through drink or drugs or circumstances, and to be able to get alongside them and say, you've lost your friends have gone home, you can't find your phone, or your phone's been stolen. And they're like, what am I going to do? How do I get home? And you can say, we carry a fund round with us so we can help people get taxis and things, to say to them, right, where do you live? we will get you home safely. Or we have a phone, let's ring your mum, let's ring your dad, let's get somebody in for you, let's ring your boyfriend, whoever.
Yeah, yeah.
And be able to do that. I would be delighted to think that if any of my sons were doing in that situation, somebody would do that for them.
Do you ever see your sons out when you're out?
Yes, frequently. On one occasion, one of my youngest sons had all his friends over staying for a reunion from Camp America. And
I'm going to have to stop you there. That's great, but we'll pick that up later. We're going to go now to the commercial break and join us after the break. Welcome back to Faith Matters. Our guests today are Mark Latham and Hilary Morgan from Street Pastors in Merseyside, or across Merseyside. If you want to contact us or offer a comment on the show, you can email faithmatters@baytvliverpool.com. Do let us know what you think about the show. Give us some ideas, perhaps, but keep it clean, keep it respectful. Okay, great to have you guys with us. And Hilary, you were telling us before the break, I rudely interrupted you about your family and connecting with your family, your own family, when you're out as a street pastor. Just finish off telling us about that.
If you're a street pastor with youngsters who are town age, you're very popular because it means they don't have to pay for a taxi home. As I was saying, my youngest son had all his friends staying for a reunion, and they all came into town. I happened to be using the street pastor car the next day.
It's quite a big car.
It is. It's a people carrier. So I was very popular because all of them fitted in and got a lift home, saved them a taxi fare.
Yeah, great.
Mum was the best one, you know.
Yeah, so you are the ordinary Liverpool mum.
Totally, yeah.
Absolutely. So Mark, you must have some stories over on the Wirral,
Yes.
even, and stories of street pastors having an effect on people. Tell us a story.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads. There's so many, both on Liverpool and Birkenhead. But I would say the one I use the most in terms of having a visual impact and a result of the seeds we sow that I know we don't always see. You know, we go out there and we see all these people we help and everything else. We don't always see the seeds, the results of our seeds. But in terms of this particular one, I always use this as sort of a conclusion to the training I provide to new street pastors across the UK as an encouragement, really, because this particular story, quite sad, really, but in terms of this particular chap, he was sort of paranoid. He'd been in a fight. His hand was had a deep cut in his hand, which was bleeding. He had his top off. It was quite a cold night, and so we sort of approached him and said, "You know, are you okay?" And established that he was a bit paranoid. He was worried that someone was going to come and shoot him from Liverpool. So we did what we could do in that moment, and we provided him with some water, settled him down a little bit, and provided him with a space blanket, and then made a decision to move on, but also be aware that he was around. And we caught up with him about sort of 2:30, where an ambulance had been called for him because his hand was still bleeding quite heavily. But he was having some aggro with the paramedic team. He wouldn't get into the back of the ambulance. They were going to leave him because he was being abusive to them. So we again stepped in, calmed him down, and successfully got him into the back of the ambulance for him to get medical treatment. And that was the end of that, as far as we were aware. But I was doing a street pastor talk at a Greasby Methodist Church men's breakfast at sort of 8:30 that morning. When I arrived, I noticed him at the back of the room. And it's important to note that I'd not met him before since the previous hours where we bundled him into the back of an ambulance. And so at the end of the talk, I came over to him and said hello, and he remembered who we were. His hand had been bandaged up. And the interesting sort of turn of events to that story is that a guy who was also at the men's breakfast, who brought him along, who didn't know him, and I hadn't met either of them prior to that, was on his way to Birkenhead that morning to pick his friend up, who had kind of cried off because it was quite early in the morning. And as he was working his way back to the men's meeting, he saw this chap and thought, he's someone who could do with a breakfast. So just picked him up and took him along. And there's no other way to explain that, but God had moved people into that guy.
That has to be more than a coincidence.
Oh, definitely. I'm not a mathematician, but to work out how you would find this guy who lives homeless in Birkenhead, I've never seen him before. And the other thing after that is, following the men's breakfast, we continue to see him week after week after week in Birkenhead, and every time we saw him, we spent time with him. And I never saw him in the day, because I do run a business in Birkenhead. I often go to Birkenhead for coffee, but I saw him and took him I've taken him for coffee a couple of times, and he's turned his life around. You know, he's on a methadone program. He's stopped drinking. He's got himself back onto an employment program. You know, he's trying to get back into his medication.
So you're talking there about a long-term effect, because it could, you know, I'm sure your detractors might say, you know, this is just a street passes. It's a sticking plaster kind of job, really. You're not really making a difference.
You do hear that, yeah.
But this sounds like, you know, that it's hard to quantify this stuff, isn't it? So
it's difficult when you don't, you know, when you provide in the moment help for people. You know, it's hard to provide evidence to support the fact that you are making an effort. And with us, you don't necessarily need to prove it. It's other people who need the proof. We don't necessarily need the proof. But what I would say is, luckily or fortunately for us, in terms of Birkenhead, with it being a small town, we see the same people week in, week out. So we build a bit of rapport, and we have the camaraderie with the people. And with him, it just so happened that he ended up being someone we saw regularly and were able to provide assistance to.
That's a great story, Hilary. You know, Liverpool's the streets are full of stories. So you know, I mean, you know, historically going back, I mean, it's true, isn't it? You know, but I mean, tell us some street stories from Liverpool City Centre.
Loads of people, obviously, on the Saturday night in the town centre. There's lots of vulnerable people who need help with ambulances and that kind of thing. And again, you don't need to know what's happened as the outcome. Sometimes you get an email tells us, and that's great. But there's a lot of funny things as well, you know, people needing directions. One of the most recent ones I can think of is a guy from Denmark that we met who'd come over for a Liverpool match.
So all Liverpool supporters from Denmark.
Yeah, we've met a few over the last year or so, but this guy had come and he'd left all his friends. He'd had a lot to drink. He was standing swaying in the middle of Concert Square. I should mention that my team's made up mainly of Evertonians, and this night there were probably 4 Evertonians on the team.
And you're wearing blue.
We're wearing blue street pastor uniforms, so we went over and said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I can't find my my hotel, don't know where I'm staying." Well, that was what we found out. He got his phone out, showed us pictures of his family, and then he sort of got his emails and found where he was staying, but we hadn't heard of it. We have an app on our phones called Your Night, which is set up by a street pastor. So we found his hotel, but it was a bit too complicated to direct him to in the condition he was in. So we said, "Okay, we'll walk you to your hotel." And he said, "Are you sure?" "Yes, we're sure. We'll walk you." So there was myself on one side, and one of the other street pastors decided we'd sort of not frog march him, but almost. So we walked him to the hotel, and on the way up,
it's a bit like the Good Samaritan.
Yeah,
literally.
We joked with him and laughed with him, and we said, "You do realise the irony of this is that you're a Liverpool supporter in the middle of Liverpool, being taken to your hotel by 2 Evertonians." And I think he was quite he was quite amused when he could actually get that through, because he was very drunk. So we handed him one of our cards and said, "You know, in the morning when you wake up and think, I was abducted by 2 Evertonians, you weren't. The back of the card says you've been street pastored." Yeah, I mean, it's got all our details
that is all the parallels with the parable of the Good Samaritan. It was just struck me there, you know. You know,
and a good probably 80% of what we do is that kind of work. 20% or more might just be calling for ambulances, sitting with somebody who's not well,
getting people in taxis,
looking after that kind of side of it. But it's a good night out for us as well.
I mean, this might be a hard question to answer, and you know, maybe you can answer it from a Merseyside perspective or even from a national perspective. Do you think you've saved anyone's life?
Certainly saved people from hypothermia.
Which could be.
Which can kill.
Because people, I mean, you know, the times I go out, I mean, people are, I mean, they are underdressed.
They're not dressed for the weather. Girls don't take jackets because they lose them in the clubs. I don't know about the men. They seem to be slightly better dressed.
They come out with shirts on and stuff, and I think, I mean, yeah. I mean,
but they do take risks, and the more they've had to drink, the more vulnerable they become, the less aware of their surroundings. And you find somebody sitting on the floor in the middle of town, in the middle of winter. You think what the weather's like today. They'll freeze very quickly.
Well, I heard a police officer call Matthew Street Falaraki without the sun. And,
Yeah, possibly.
I think nationally, would say definitely we have. Nationally, there's definitely all over the UK. There are constantly reports of incidences, and it's also by being a presence, you prevent things happening. So there are constant examples where, I won't sort of go into detail, but projects that have been set up prior to them being set up, there were high levels of people jumping into the river, and then once they were set up, they've come down to zero. I know situations that we've been involved in on the Wirral side, and we've had to report back to Ascension Trust, and they've said if you weren't there, that person would be dead. And
well,
so,
I've also heard that there's been a reduction in people admitted with glass injuries in Liverpool. Now, there's no way of proving it, but it could be down to
we can pick up as many
the flip-flops
as
that you give out.
80 glass bottles on a Saturday as you're patrolling
And you're
around.
giving girls flip-flops when they can
so
no
they've
longer
taken their
walk on the
shoes off.
shoes, stilettos.
So there's not the weapons there, but there's also not the broken glass on the floor for them to tread on. It does make a big difference, particularly when, if you've seen the girls' heels.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't walk in those for 2 minutes, never mind a whole night.
Yeah.
neither could I, just for the record.
And he has tried.
Okay, just tell us briefly, because we're about to finish, but how do people get in touch with you if they want to be a street pastor?
They contact Liverpool City Centre Street Pastors. Our coordinator is Clive Durham. We have a website. The emails are on there. There's a Facebook page.
Is that what? LiverpoolCityCenterStreetPastors.com?
Yeah. And we have a Facebook
Thank you very
page.
much, guys. Great to have you with us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Join us next week for Faith Matters.